We dreamt about Resident Evil Requiem. We speculated about this new adventure into the Resident Evil saga, and finally arrived. It was a smashing hit at the moment, sold 6 million copies, is the fast selling game in the saga, and everybody has an opinion about it, and I have it as well. And welcome to Arcade Coffee. This is my new podcast. I have already a podcast in Italian about gaming, but I wanted to create one in English that it's very special because it's gonna be focused on, let's say, critique about video games and general opinion about the media and about the medium. Actually, I should say it's a new adventure, so I have a concept in mind, but as I said for the Italian podcast, and I'm not a professional creator, I do this in my spare time. I am a very passionate gamer that is playing video games since I was a kid, and I want to do this just to have fun and for the sake of talking about video games, that it's something that I love dearly, and I want to share my thoughts, my opinion, and my deep dive about the game that I play and that I love. It's a podcast made from a gamer to gamers, and I called it Arcade Coffee because it's a place where you come to chill. So this review, it's not an actual review. I mean, it's not the kind of content that you consume because you want to understand if you actually are going to love this game or stuff like that. Maybe someone can use it for that purpose, but the purpose of this content, since I don't receive code in advance and stuff like that, it's not my end game, even speaking broadly about what I'm doing, but the objective of this content, it's just to talk about the game and to share my thoughts and to go a little bit, dive a little bit into the kind of the craft of making games and into what this game is all about. So it's a chat about the game. I call it a review just for, I don't know, because semantically it's a review, can be, but anyway, it's a chat about Resident Evil Requiem. So if you want to have a chat with me, you are free to follow, and I hope you will enjoy. So let's talk about Resident Evil Requiem, developed of course by Capcom. The director is Koshi Nakanishi, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. I played it on PS5, the basic version, not the Pro. My playthrough lasted 12 hours, a little bit more than 12 hours, and I play it with the normal difficulty, with the classic version, so I have the ink ribbon and the typewriter to save the game with Grace. With Leon, that is an entire a generic saving system entirely, but we're gonna talk about it later on. And as I usually do with Resident Evil, I try to basically solve every puzzle, even secondary puzzle. I fail in a couple of instances because the game has peculiar mechanics in some part, and kind of he invites you to a second, third run, as the genre is supposed to do. So I didn't manage to solve everything, but anyway, I gave it a try, so you have an idea of why it took me 12 hours to go through an entire run. I'm gonna talk about Resident Evil Requiem without spoilers. There are not going to be any spoilers. I will leave a small segment at the very end just to talk about a little bit of some stuff that to me are very funny and very peculiar about Resident Evil, because there is something about this chapter that it's very not new, but anyway, it's something that it's interesting to discuss. But anyway, that is going to be at the very end. I'm gonna let you know when the spoilers are coming, but the majority, the the entire content is spoiler free, except for that final part that are gonna try to basically put sign and scream that spoilers are coming. So don't worry, if you haven't played the game, you want to just hear about it, you are completely safe, okay? I'm not gonna spoil anything, okay? So let's start with Resident Evil Requiem. So there was a discussion about this game, and the discussion was, is this choice to give basically to the player two gameplay that are both rooted into whatever Resident Evil is, so a classic gameplay and a more action gameplay, it's a decision that it's like a way to, I don't know, pursue too much of a fan service route. So it's something to kind of kiss the ass of the audience. I don't think so. Honestly, I don't think so. And I'm gonna discuss my point in this section before moving on and explain a little bit more about the gameplay and the two and how the gameplay is split in two. Okay, so I believe that with Resident Evil Requiem, Capcom started a conversation, an invisible conversation with the audience and the fan of the saga. And this conversation, it goes back from the very beginning of the saga, and it's the first Resident Evil. I have still my copy of the first Resident Evil that I play on PlayStation. It was the Platinum Collection. I don't know if it was like this everywhere, but anyway, Platinum Collection. This is the first Resident Evil that I play. And I think that the conversation that Capcom started, it's very peculiar in a way, because it doesn't even start from the actual first game. It starts from Resident Evil 2. But we're gonna deep dive into that later on. But anyway, the conversation that Capcom is having is the following. So Resident Evil was such an important saga in the history of the survival horror as a genre, because even if there was Alone in the Dark as kind of a first 3D survival horror, actually was Capcom in 1996 when they released the first Resident Evil. I'm gonna show you a couple of images of actually what is kind of the remake of the game. Actually, it's not the remake of the game, but anyway, when they released the first game in 1996, they basically created the first actually survival horror. Because if you have a look at the gameplay loop, the gameplay mechanic of a survival horror, what everyone started to work on when they wanted to make a survival horror, actually the first Resident Evil is the blueprint, because it kind of set the rules for the genre. It's the game that actually in the history of gaming provided the rules, in a way, the ground to build a survival horror. So what kind of gameplay loop you should build and what kind of gameplay you should have in a survival horror. So Capcom is talking to that audience that was there since the beginning, but that audience at the same time is the audience that, moving on, has seen an evolution of a genre. So with Resident Evil 2, there was a second evolution of that kind of became more popular in a way with Resident Evil 2. But then moving on with Resident Evil 3, they changed something. With Resident Evil 4, they moved towards a more action kind of idea, an action horror. It was still a survival horror, but became a kind of an action horror. And then moving forward, Resident Evil kind died actually, because if Resident Evil 5 was a game that kind of resonated a little bit with the audience, with Resident Evil 6 the saga kind of died. It came to a stop. And the only way Capcom managed to save the saga was doing something very bold. So move Resident Evil into the future, but going back in time. So when they announced it and then released Resident Evil 7, what they did was basically propose a new engine, the RE engine, but at the same time, have this conversation with the audience that was saying, okay, now the survival horror genre evolve into this first person perspective to give more immersion, but even compared to the first Resident Evils, Dino Crisis, Silent Hill, and stuff like that, it's clear that the audience now wants horror game to be very immersive, very spooky, and possibly narrative kind of more serious, and not like a B movie that is just a B movie cheeky kind of horror. They want something more, but they want mostly a very immersive experience, and that came thanks to the first person perspective that many games started to apply in the genre. So Capcom decided to go for the first person perspective, but at the same time they push a little bit more on the horror, and they push a little bit more on the gameplay to go back to the roots of the survival horror. So the game was transformed in a sort of fusion between the first two Resident Evil games and this new breed of survival horror that it's more scary, more immersive, and they created Resident Evil 7. And then they came out with Village. To me, Village was a disappointment because they kind of went from the beginning of the saga directly to Resident Evil 4, because basically Resident Evil Village is Resident Evil 4 but in first person and with way more action that we could actually have probably endure in a Resident Evil, and it went from 0 to hero right away. But in the meantime, before Resident Evil Village, after they saved the saga with Resident Evil 7, because Resident Evil 7, as we know, according to different reports that came out recently, it was the game that saved the saga, because people started again to have interest in Resident Evil, because the game worked. Even if I think, for example, the ship part at the end, it's atrocious in a way. It's stretched the gameplay too much for whatever it is. But anyway, we're gonna talk about this later on, speaking of longevity. But anyway, what they have done was revive the saga. So the saga was no longer a zombie, it was alive and well. And then they did something way more courageous that probably we give credit to them. So they went for a remake, and they made a remake of Resident Evil 2 that became it was already a beloved classic, but became again a super beloved classic for a new generation. And in this way, Resident Evil was completely revived. The genre came back again, because the survival horror, the classic survival horror, came back thanks to Resident Evil 2 remake, because Capcom, once again, the company that created the survival horror genre as we know it, managed to redefine that same genre, and so giving the third person perspective, the way they updated the gameplay loop, the way that they updated the gameplay mechanic for that entire world. And so starting this new wave of remake with then the remake of Resident Evil 3 that is kind of lazy, but the successful remake of Resident Evil 4, they created something. And then this gameplay speaks to the audience, I think, in two ways. The first way, we want to give you this gameplay because we understood that the audience loves the new way of Resident Evil. So the first person, very horror-based, immersive experience where the survival mechanics are very pushed to the limit. So very few items to survive, so you gotta watch out. You can't go full action, you can't invest too much into the action. You gotta watch out what you do, who you kill, and how you kill them. But at the same time, we know that you really love the kind of action horror formula connected to Resident Evil 4. And this is the first part of the conversation and the first level. But there is the other level or layer, whatever you want to call it, that this conversation, it's also based on the fact that in a way, it's like if Resident Evil, the first game, the very first game that created the saga, kind of doesn't exist. In a way. Hear me out what I'm trying to say. What is peculiar about the recent way Capcom started this invisible conversation with the audience, it goes down this way. Basically, Resident Evil, the first game, it's a milestone. It's something that it's in the history of video game as they created the survival horror as a genre. But as a Resident Evil per se, it's not very iconic. I mean, there are mechanics, speaking of the survival horror genre, that are very iconic. The doors opening in the dark to basically hide the loading screen, that they were used as a method to create suspense and to fright in a way the players. The enigma, the fixed camera, the tank control, the environment made iconic through pre-render environment and stuff like that. There are so many things that are iconic, but the game itself, Jill Valentine, is not that iconic. Chris Redfield is not that iconic. I mean, some people are very in love with Chris because he's very muscular. In Resident Evil 5, he punches rocks with his bare hands, way over the top. But the first Resident Evil, Jill Valentine, if we watch even the remake, she's kind of dumb. I mean, it's not that great character. It's not that charismatic. The game, it's a milestone. We love it. I think the remake that they've made back then, it's fantastic. They extend even the gameplay. They add some stuff. The re-render environment are fantastic. That compared to the original, it's far superior. And I love that game, to be honest. I love that game. But speaking of the cultural phenomenon of Resident Evil, it's the second one that it kind of actually became a phenomenon culture. So Leon Kennedy, the rookie cop coming to Raccoon City, home of Umbrella, and stepping into a nightmare. That what became very iconic. Birkin became iconic. Ada Wong became iconic. The Route A and Route B, because even in the first Resident Evil, you could choose the two different characters, but the difference was very kind of, slot into the inventory, stuff like that. But in the second one, they gave a further reason to have two routes, to the replayability, to get the gameplay loop. The game is far superior. It's more interesting also because the way they evolved the technology for the pre-render environment. If you check the original Resident Evil and then the sequel, there is a big jump. Also because one was on PlayStation 1, the second was a big jump in technology. It was a step forward. It wasn't just the first attempt, it was a more confident attempt to make a second game. And I mean, it's so iconic. Leon Kennedy became an icon. Ada Wong became an icon. and they know it. And if you notice the lore of Resident Evil, what are the two chapters that are most loved by the fan? Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 4. I know so many people say, but I love Resident Evil 3 Nemesis. Yes, so many people love that game, and I understand why. But it's not like it's a milestone. It's not like it's a game that it's in the history of the saga in the same way as the second and the fourth are out there. And I think that in a way Capcom is very aware of it, and that's why they started to make the remake from the second one, because I think they have more interesting concept for the gameplay loop, for the replayability, and for how they could rewrite the story in a more interesting way. And so the conversation here is that it's like if the Resident Evil saga, in a way, in the way also Resident Evil Requiem framed the whole thing, it's like if the whole saga is basically made by Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil 4, and now Resident Evil Requiem. Everything else is there, they acknowledge it, but it's like if the main saga, it's all based on Raccoon City. And Spencer mentioned, sorry, I was about to say Villa in Italian. Spencer mentioned and Arklay Mountain and everything that happened out there. It's kind of, yeah, it's there, but it's not it's not the iconic part of the saga. That's kind of the narration. And since they took Requiem as a sort, I mean, the title of the game itself, it's pretty telling of the intention and on the story. The whole thing is like, this is a requiem to a period in time, to a part of the story. So since we have to say goodbye to this part of the story and close a circle, we are closing actually the circle. So we have from one side the most beloved hero in the saga, because even if I take in consideration people's personal taste, but on a pop culture level, Leon Kennedy is the most iconic character in the saga. The others are kind of a meme level. Even Wesker is a meme. He's a meme even in this game, we can say at some point, even if it's very subtle. But we're gonna talk about in the spoiler part, so I'm not gonna say anything else. But anyway, Leon Kennedy is the hero of the saga, is the most iconic, is the one is in the most beloved games. And he brings some specific mechanics. On the other side, we have Grace Ashcroft. She's part of the saga as well, in a way. She's a new character, but she's the daughter of a character that is part of the saga in chapters that are basically kind of not part of the main canon, part of the canon but not main canon. So Resident Evil 1, 2, 3, 4, 0, Code Veronica, she's not part of that canon specifically as a character, playable character, but she's in the story. And she basically, it's like if Leon is the son, the actual main product, main hero of Resident Evil. Grace is the daughter of this new generation of game, and she's like perfect to create a sort of bridge between what they've done with their reinvention of the saga, so Resident Evil 2 remake and Resident Evil 7 remake, and propose to the player the two worlds connected together, Leon and Grace. I think this is the conversation going on, and because they engineer the whole thing to follow this concept, like if the main saga is actually made by Resident Evil 2, 4, and then Requiem, in order to create a sort of a parallel canon, or a canon that it's like rewriting the whole Resident Evil saga idea, if those are the main story and everything else is like rotating around it. In this order of idea, Resident Evil Requiem, this choice for this gameplay totally makes sense to me. It's perfectly justified. And then this is the other the other idea, the game is divided in two macro acts. There is the act with Grace, the act with Leon, and then the last act, so the ending, that it's kind of a mix of Leon and Grace gameplay. So what this is all about, we start, the first act is with Grace, is an introduction to Grace. So we are back to the basic survival horror kind of mechanics of Resident Evil 2 mixed with Resident Evil 7. So they tell you you have the choice to play in third person, but if you want to play the game with the actual ideas, how they conceived the game, you gotta play it in first person, and that's how I played. I will probably try the third person with other rounds and stuff like that, but to be honest, I really enjoyed the first person. I loved it. And what they've done, I'm going to talk about this very broadly, and I'm not going to go into super details, but I'm a chatter, so I'm going to talk about 4 hours. But anyway, what they have done with Resident Evil Requiem, with the gameplay, what they've done is basically that they created a game that conceptually, it goes back to a basic idea of survival horror. So not so many resources. You can't actually shoot down every enemy you encounter. You gotta watch out for the resources. If you play with the classic difficulty, so with the ink ribbon and the typewriter, you gotta watch out. Even you have another element of tension because you gotta manage that side of the game. But at the same time, we are going back to zombies. So this is another layer. We are not checking Las Plagas. We are not introducing enemies like in Resident Evil 7. We are going back to the zombies because that's where everything started. We go back to Spencer and the T-Virus. We're going back to the roots. And gameplay-wise, the first person experience with Grace, it's very horrific and it's a very survival horror based experience. So if you love what they have done with Resident Evil 2 remake and Resident Evil 7, you're gonna dig Grace gameplay because it's fantastic. It's basically that you have that gameplay loop of the main location in the Grace Act are basically if I remember correctly, 2 locations. So this sort of hospital, let's call it like that, medical structure, where you it's like a sort of a police station from Resident Evil 2 remake or Resident Evil 2 in general. Then you have an underground, or because the structure in a Resident Evil game, it's always the same. You have a house, a police station, or whatever. Then you have a sewer or a dungeon or an underground, and then you have the laboratory. It's always like that. Always. And once again, we have the same structure. So with Grace, you have this sort of a hospital that works like a sort of police station, and you have the same gameplay, weird puzzle, some mechanics that are very the gameplay loop is the basic gameplay loop of a survival horror. And on top of that, since you are in first person and you are pushing, the game is pushing a lot on the horror side, you have to watch out for resources and you have to deal with those new zombies because they brought back the zombies, but they have a new identity. So those zombies basically they have this idea. The general idea is that they basically maintain trait of when they were alive. So basically in some cases you have, I don't know, a zombie that she was a maid, so if she sees blood on the ground she's going there to clean it up, and so if there is blood on the ground she's gonna be busy doing that. There is a guy that was the guy that was turning off and on the lights. He was really into lights because he didn't want to have many lights around, and so you can use the lights to distract him and stuff like that. There are zombies that maybe in life they were singers or whatever, so they're gonna stun you singing or screaming or stuff like that. They're gonna be zombies that they may be in life they were doctors or whatever, so they are more comfortable in using weapons and stuff like that. So in this way you have different approach when you move around the map of the game, because you have to take in consideration the kind of zombie that you are going to face. But the thing that is also funny is that they introduced these new mechanics that it's very similar to the Resident Evil 1 remake. So some zombies, they come back to life in a way. You kill them, but the T-virus evolve if their head doesn't explode. Basically, the T-virus evolve and they can come back, and they are more aggressive, they are faster, and they are more difficult to put down. So your gameplay is gonna be based on the fact that you can't actually go full action with those enemies. Like Resident Evil 2 was more balanced. It was a balance between action and survival horror. Those mechanics coexisted. In this game, it's more survival. Grace, she's not a police woman. She's not from STARS, an elite kind of sort of team. She's an FBI analyst, so she has a training, but she's not much on the field. So you gotta hide, you gotta walk around those zombies, and thanks to new ideas, new solution, you can decide how to kill some zombies and when. So for example, there is this new thing about this formula that if you inject the zombie with the formula, they basically explode, and so they are definitely dead. Completely dead. There is no way they're coming back. But of course, to create this formula, you have to use the crafting system that you have in the game, because they introduced this new crafting system where you have to collect those sample of blood that you can collect when you kill zombies or from blood that you find around. Of course, it's not unlimited, it has a limit, but you're gonna use these those sample of blood plus stuff that you find around the environment, like scrap part and other stuff, to create some in some cases you can create ammos for your weapons, or in other cases you can create ink ribbon for the typewriter, or alternatively with another combination you can create this formula to kill definitely the zombies. But at this point it kicks in the gameplay loop of a survival game. So which one you actually want to kill with the formula, what resources you want to use to create bullets or other stuff. You can craft even knives that are temporary, that you can use them to kill or stab zombies in case they try to bite you. So you gotta take a choice, and sometimes the choice is very wise, so you can clear a path from a zombies that's gonna be later on very annoying. In some cases you can make a mistake and maybe, I don't know, use your weapon and your bullet to kill a zombie that is gonna come back later and it's gonna be very annoying for you. And well, you kind of not compromise, but you created yourself a bigger problem than the one you could have if you pick another choice. So it's very interesting, the gameplay. It's very survival kind of in a most classic and possible way. And I love the fact that they brought back a sort of different iteration of Mr. X. So the kind of monster that chase you down around the map in specific part of the map, and that can be annoying for different reasons. Like, I love the fact as well that they create a couple of safe room that are not 100% safe. This is something that I love, except for one room that it's always completely safe. There are a couple of instances where the safe room, well, it's not super safe, and it's fine. It gives you a little bit of more attention. So I love what they have done with gameplay systems. Speaking of Grace, because it's interesting. You gotta manage your resources. Your resources are not unlimited. You gotta make choices. You gotta also think about how you can upgrade Grace skills, because there is this thing that around, if you solve secondary puzzle and secondary stuff, you find those virus sample that you can, with a mini game, elaborate on a computer, and that will unlock more recipe, let's say, to craft more items, and that of course will give you an advantage. But there is also a room where you can use coins to basically unlock those power ups. So there is a cabinet that if you can unlock with, I don't know, 2 or 4 coins, you can unlock an expansion pack for your inventory. There is another one that will allow you to expand how much blood you can collect with your injector to create stuff. There is another one that will improve permanently your aim and your damage output when you shoot with your guns. I basically managed to update Grace with every element in these cabinets that I found in that specific room. But it's also funny that the number of coin that you can collect, it's variable. I mean, you can collect the same amount of coin to unlock everything in different ways. Some stuff are you gotta figure it out how to collect some stuff, and some part of the map are closed and can be unlocked just if you kill, let's say, specific enemies, but you find out how, who, and when, moving on with the game and exploring this map. And so I really loved the gameplay they gave to Grace. It's very nerve-wracking, it's horrific, it's fun to play, as an amazing gameplay loop, speaking of survival horror. And I think that playing it with the classic Ink Ribbon, it's perfect. It's the perfect balance, because even if it's not super, I think myself as an average gamer, I can't say I'm a super skilled gamer. No, I'll never say that. But I think that even as an average gamer, I think it's basically impossible to finish the Ink Ribbon, because you can craft them, and craft them, it's not that expensive. Of course, you can't craft 1,000 of Ink Ribbon. You gotta make a choice, because more Ink Ribbon you craft, less resources for other tools that are very useful you have at your disposal. So anyway, you gotta be bold and say, okay, I'm not gonna save for the next 40 minutes because I want to clean those area and I want to do all of those secondary puzzle and stuff, because I want to try to do everything. And so I'm gonna invest my resources in other stuff, and then I will save and create an Ink Ribbon and save. It adds a layer into the mix, and I love it. But if you play with the regular difficulty, the more modern, it's gonna be fun anyway. I think that's I prefer to play with the Ink Ribbon, but that's up to you. I think it's gonna be fun anyway. But I really love Grace gameplay, because it's full of different solutions to approach the game. It's very funny to see the consequences of how you can sometimes even play with those new kind of zombies. And I think it's the best part of the classic Resident Evil experience, in a way, even if it's very focused on not going action in most of the cases, because it's not like Resident Evil 2 where you actually at some point say, okay, I have enough ammo, I can just have fun and shoot down a couple of zombies. You have to be a little bit more conservative compared to the previous chapter, but still I think it's a solid gameplay. And the other thing that I love is that they managed to do something very clever. So this huge act, that is the Grace Act, it has anyway a sort of rhythm. So here and then, when you finish, because the macro act inside has small act, because as I said before, the structure is always the same. So Grace has the house, in this case is the hospital, and then she has a sort of a dungeon, a sewer, and then she has the laboratory, the mini laboratory in this part, and then there is Leon act, and then there is the ending. So in the micro act inside is her macro act, you had those brief session with Leon. And there are more action, of course, because you start to see Leon gameplay. And that it's helpful because, first thing first, brings on the narrative. It gives the narrative a more... there is connective tissue to help the narrative develop correctly and to not just mix the two characters randomly. The second idea is that it gives a good rhythm to the game. So if there was just a huge act with Grace and then a huge act with Leon and then at the end a final act that mixed the two, I think it would have been problematic. In this way, the story has the perfect rhythm and also the gameplay, because it's a sort of a refresh. After playing such a heavy gameplay, nerve-wracking gameplay with Grace, you have a sort of a refresh with Leon that is more action. It's a little bit more wacky, and even if it's in similar area, it's more fun. You have a little bit of sort of a relief, and so it's that refresh sensation. And it's also very brief because you play with Leon for like 20 minutes and then you go back to Grace. It's not like you play an hour with Leon. It's just a brief moment. In fact, you don't have save point. It's just the automatic save because it's such a small window of gameplay that it's perfect. And I think it's well balanced. And once you finish the side with Grace, you switch to the macro act with Leon. Okay. And of course, the macro act with Leon is more action, as the part of the gameplay that it still has element of survival horror. There is a whole part in an underground side of the raccoon city with water and zombies, but it's more action packed. Stuff explode, you have lots of ammo, we have loads of weapon, and it's more, let's say, action and in a way kind of, I won't say trash, but it's way over the top, like Resident Evil 4 in a way. So, and this part of the gameplay, it's different. You don't have, of course, even if you play with the classic difficulty, you don't have ink ribbon with typewriter. You just have unlimited save with Leon, and to me makes sense because it would be very weird to have basically what can I say, sort of a gameplay mechanic with I don't know, with ribbon. It didn't, I probably won't click. It's not the same, it doesn't work. It has to be a little bit more action with Leon and more flexible. You don't even have a chest where to manage your inventory. With Leon, you just have this sort of terminal where basically you exchange weapon. You can buy new weapon that they have different qualities. So one can be more powerful but less I don't know, less precise, more difficult to handle. You have those kind of feature with Leon, and the gameplay, it's like, okay, I'm gonna invest on those weapons. With Leon you have a gun, You have different gun that you can choose from. You have a sniper rifle, a couple of sniper rifle. You have a couple of shotgun. You have a small machine gun. You have, of course, your hatchet to parry attack, to dodge attack. You can, with Leon, you can sometimes you can avoid even to take a weapon. You can just dodge attack because anyway the parry window is so designed for an arcade game that it's very easy to parry the zombie attack. You're gonna learn so quickly. So you're just gonna, every time you kill someone, you get points, and that points are basically what can I say, your money to make improvement to the weapon. And so you can play in this way. You don't put object in your save point. You don't leave object behind. You just sell. You have two I don't know, shotgun. You just want to use one because it's the one you prefer, the gun you're gonna level up. You just sell the other one, and that's it. It's very arcade Leon gameplay, and honestly I like it, but at the same time it's the weakest one. I'm gonna be honest. I think it's the one that is the most problematic part of the game, I think. And because I think it's not as curated as the gameplay with Grace. And what I found not pristine about Leon gameplay is, for example, first things first about Leon gameplay, the boss fight. The boss fight in Resident Evil are a kind of they are always arcade. In Resident Evil has never been a boss fight very complex, and it's not like Metal Gear Solid where you expect huge set piece with important boss fight. No, absolutely not. In Resident Evil you have something that it's more arcade. So for example, let's go back to Birkin, or with many kind of enemy that we encounter in Resident Evil. Huge yellow eye on the shoulder. You gotta shoot there. Maybe there are a couple of phases. Is getting angrier, is breaking everything, is breaking pipes, and there is smoke everywhere. You have those kind of boss fight, very action arcade, but they have a simple design, but at least is there. In Resident Evil Requiem with Leon, I think the couple of boss fight that you have are very uninspired. It just point and shoot. Wherever, it's fine. There is a huge boss fight with a spider that is very annoying. The map is super limited. The spider is huge, is super fast, keeps chasing you, and you just gotta run around in circle because the spider is dumb as hell, so it just keeps chasing you. You just run in circle. From time to time you turn around, you shoot at him, and then you keep running. That's nothing much there. And there are other boss fights that are very flat. They're not very inspired. It's so just point and shoot, and that's it. Wherever you shoot, it's fine. There is a sort of a mini boss that you encounter, a sort of a zombie that has those huge weak spots that you need to explode, and it's a sort of a blotter from The Last of Us. It's something like that, but it's okay. It's fine. It's fine. It's funny. There is a it's full of zombies. There is this thing as well. It's fine. You're gonna easily overcome it. It's funny, but it's not a boss fight. It's just a mid boss, and it's funny to have it him here and there. And the boss fight are very the weak point. Are not very inspired. There is a moment with a motorcycle. It became a kind of a thing online. Everyone talking about Resident Evil Requiem is posting the same screenshot of Leon jumping with the motorcycle. But that part of the gameplay with the motorcycle, I believe, my opinion, is horrible to play. I think it's the worst part of Leon gameplay. It's terrible because the first thing I thought, I was like, Uncharted 4 was released ages ago. How come that nobody say maybe we should copy a little bit that gameplay? Because I think they were onto something. We should copy Naughty Dog at least for that set pieces, because basically those part of gameplay are huge set pieces, action set pieces, heavily scripted, where the player has little to none agency, but that little to none agency has to be at least engaging, very dynamic and fun. The problem is that the part with the motorcycle, it's, I don't know, it's very slow, it's not dynamic whatsoever. There is no sense of velocity and urgency. You have those monsters chasing you, they basically don't attack you for huge window of time. It's very action arcade old school, that it's part of Capcom kind of signature gameplay. But if you want to make something action, it has to be action. It's okay that it has to be for the general average player, but at least something fun. And it's not fun. You just they run, you shoot them down, you basically don't maneuver at all the bike, you just give general direction, you don't do much. And the whole thing is that you run on the bike, you shoot those enemy, then the enemy you are chasing just blocking your road. Leon stop, two enemies spawn in front of you, they just look at you for like 10 to 20 10 seconds, 10 intense, very long second, you just shoot them down. Like if it was, gave me the impression, the rhythm of this part gave me the impression of House of the Dead, or those a game with a lighting gun from the arcade. That same idea, but in 2026 in an action game like that, it's not that inspiring and it's very boring. And when this part is finished, you go like, okay, it was something. But it's not very funny. After a solid part with Leon that was very action-packed, with a little bit of sort of gameplay based on survival horror but more action mechanics, that part is kind of a disappointment. I'm gonna be honest, it's the weakest part in the game, to be honest. The boss fights and the motorcycle part, and everything else is okay. The game is super action packed. There are tons of zombies. There are zombies that throws you weapon, that try to bring you down in any way possible, but you have parries, you have lots of ammos, you can do whatever. The best part of Leon gameplay is that you go back to Raccoon City. That's the best part of Leon's gameplay, that you go back to Raccoon City, and it's very moving. And in a way, while I was playing, I was like, you really went down the Metal Gear Solid 4 kind of vibes. You really went down to you really went back to that sort of vibes. You went back to somebody at Capcom has played heavily that part, because basically it serves as a blueprint to recreate the same moment. If you play Metal Gear Solid 4, the return to Shadow Moses, it's the blueprint to the return to the Raccoon City Police Department, because there is a huge chunk of the gameplay of the macro act of Leon in Raccoon City that it's part of in Raccoon City that we have never played in any shape or form. But then at some point there is a part where you go back to the Raccoon City Police Department, and the map is the same, the way you reach the police department is the same. You open the gate, you are in front of the police department, and once you step in, the magic starts. They've done a very impressive job, because you have the music, you have the original music, dun, 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 na, na, na. Not the one that they included in the remake, but the actual original music from the Raccoon City Police Department. You have so many references to the original Resident Evil 2 remake. I'm not gonna spoil anything. I'm just gonna say that there are locations that you can explore, and I'm gonna give you some nice feels. There are line of dialogue that they're gonna trigger flashback and memories, and Leon dialogue are gonna be very roots into stuff that you have done in the previous game. It's very well built. I loved it, and I honestly have a save file extra just because I want to go back and explore that part a little bit more, because there are a couple of things that I haven't explored. And if you look around a little bit more, there is even the garage area. You can go to the Kendo gun shop, and there is a whole thing there that I'm not going to discuss, and then you move on. But that small part of the Raccoon City Police Department is a solid part, and it's very the root of Resident Evil Requiem, and it's very, very, very well done. So kudos to Capcom to the creation of that part. You go even back to the orphanage, and in the same way as the part of Grace, you have relief from the action gameplay, because it also makes sense that you switch from Grace to Leon. Totally makes sense, narrative speaking, but also you have a moment where you need a kind of a break, same as for Grace, from Leon's gameplay, and you need to go back to that spooky, tense feeling that you had with Grace to feel completely powerless and defenseless, and you do that, and it's fantastic. Even if it's a little bit more lazy, there is a part with Grace at the orphanage. Whoever has played it knows, who hasn't will know that it's a bit lazy to me, okay? But it's kind of cool. I like it for the rhythm of the game and the rhythm of the storytelling. It's fine, makes sense. And the last part of discussing Leon gameplay, I'm gonna discuss in the ending. So let's finish here the macro act for Leon. Let's go back to the final act where the two gameplays start to be interconnected. So in the last part of the game, you keep switching between Grace and Leon and between the two gameplay. And I'm gonna be honest, on a narrative level, I love this part of the game because there are so many feels connected to the original Resident Evil. Of course, it's Resident Evil Requiem, so it's gonna be the most interesting part. It's also because it's the ending, speaking of narrative and feels and stuff like that. But at the same time, the final part of the game, this huge final act, is also the worst, because both gameplay, even if I love the Grace gameplay more than the Leon gameplay, even at the ending, both have the same problem, that the game is it's the final stretch. There is nothing more that you can do with those gameplay, with the idea that they had, because in the final part, the laboratory, you have, let's say, how can I say this without spoiling? You have a returning enemy from the saga. I'm not gonna refer directly to, I don't want to spoil any surprise, but that enemy doesn't give you any edge, speaking of gameplay, how you take down. So I'm making an example. In Resident Evil 2, when you go to the laboratory, you have the plant zombies, and they have a specific mechanic, and in a way the gameplay there is the same that you had for the entire game, but the idea that you have those enemies makes it a little bit interesting, because it gives chance to the game to have a second life. It renovates a little bit, because Resident Evil 2, I'm going to talk about it later on as well, I think it's the perfect Resident Evil in the saga, because every act of the game, so police station, sewer slash no, sewer without slash, sewer and laboratory, they manage to have different enemies that renovate the game, and it's fantastic. The game never, the gameplay loop never gets old because they find a way to give to the player new challenges. In this game, unfortunately, in the final part, there is nothing like the plant zombies. You just have the same enemy over, and these new or new old enemy that they bring back. But the only thing that it does is to stretch the gameplay that you have already played to an extremis, and it's not fun anymore at some point. Even Grace. So if the Grace peculiar part of her gameplay is that you gotta act stealth, that you are going to be defenseless, you're gonna try to take any resources that you need to take, and you're gonna be very careful and stuff like that. That thing is multiplied by 1,000. There is a room that was to me was a travesty of a gameplay because there are so many enemies in such a crowded space, and with so few solution about how to go through that room, and with a concept that is so poor that I was like, come on, you are stretching the gameplay, the Grace gameplay, with just a very lazy idea. Same thing applied to Leon. Leon at the end, if it was action before, in the laboratory is not action. In the laboratory it's like it's throwing enemies on Leon's face and give you any resources possible to blow them up in a most funny in a way, but still kind of ridiculous way. Even there, as a design, you can feel kind of a sort of a fatigue about the design. I like Grace's part more than Leon's part, but still both of them have the same trouble. It's a stretch, even if, speaking of narrative, makes sense that the game is still going on. Okay, so at the end of the day, the choice to give those two gameplays totally makes sense because it's Requiem for everything we said before. They're trying to conclude the whole saga, mixing those two reality and having the conversation that I said before with the players. So the concept makes sense for Requiem, but some stuff I think they could have been improved. I think they could have developed different enemies according to the different area. As I said, for Resident Evil 2, you move from the police station to the sewer and then to the laboratory. You have 3 different set of enemies that they have peculiarities. In this game, you move from an area to another. Nothing changes much. It's still the same enemies, it's still the same things. It's not that interesting. And at the end of the day, you know what? I didn't enjoy even the crafting. I mean, I enjoy the mechanic per se, it works. It's not bad. This is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that I think crafting is just gives to Resident Evil Requiem a dynamic that it's very familiar in the gameplay scenario. Speaking of every game, that it gets, basically you missed an occasion to give a peculiarity to Resident Evil. What I'm saying is this, okay, picture the regular Resident Evil. Resident Evil 2 Remake, that to me is the perfect form of Resident Evil. What do you have? You have gunpowder. You have the blue gunpowder, the big one, the small one. You have the red gunpowder. You have plants, the green plants, the regular plants for recover life. You have the yellow, the red plants, and then the purple plants for the venom and stuff like that. And you can combine them. And the combination that it's basically a sort of a crafting, but it's just called combine. But it's a sort of a crafting without recipe. It's very interesting. Because in Resident Evil 2, the game is not giving you recipe like you open the menu, oh, mix this and this and you have this. It's not like that. And even if you have this thing of the mini game that I mentioned before to have more recipe, the game gives you anyway the basic recipe to do the stuff. So it's very uninspired and very not funny. In the original Resident Evil, you have document here and there saying, whoa, I found out that if I mix the blue powder and the red powder, I make, I don't know, shotgun shells, for example, stuff like that. But basically, you gotta figure out what you need to mix and what is gonna give you at the end of the day. It's the same thing for the plants. I would have loved that this trait, that it's typical of Resident Evil, would have come into Requiem. So, I'll make you an example. Let's talk about the solution, the purple pink solution that make the zombie explode. I would have loved, if I'm okay with the fact of collecting blood sample from the zombie, but I would have loved if around the map, instead of finding scraps to make bullets or stuff like that, I would have loved to find gunpowder, for example, as in the original Resident Evil, to make bullets, so to combine gunpowders to keep making bullets, and that makes sense instead of scraps that it's very generic. But also, I would have loved for the formula to make the zombie explode, to use the plants, because it's the root and an identity and a staple of the Resident Evil franchise. So they could have just made that around the area you find the green plants for the health. But if you want to make the zombie explode, they could have just said, okay, on the Arklay Mountains, a document saying, on the Arklay Mountains, we found this new breed of plant, the, I don't know, pink plant. And the pink plant, if you combine the pink plant with, I don't know, a green plant, or with the blood, you obtain a serum that will explode zombies. And that would be more inspiring, to be honest, and more connected to the identity of Resident Evil and to the feel of Resident Evil. Since it's Resident Evil Requiem, there is this conversation about going back to the roots of the saga. I would have found more interesting and inspiring this idea. Instead, the crafting, it's kind of level the identity and the gameplay to Resident Evil to a, I don't know, industry standard. It sounds very boring. And I think they missed an occasion to make something that it's very rooted into what is Resident Evil. That's my opinion. And so I enjoy, anyway, at the end of the day, the crafting connected with the mechanics of the survival. It's not that I didn't like it, but I think if they have developed the basic combined system with items that were very connected to the world of Resident Evil, so the gunpowder that you have just, for example, in Leon gameplay, so the gunpowder and the plants and those kind of stuff would have been way more interesting and way more fun to play, because you were like, okay, what do I combine here? What can I do with those two plants, or with the blood and the plants? Or that would have been way better. Even to create upgrade for Grace. Maybe you find a yellow plant, and the yellow plant, if you combine it with a red plant, create a serum to improve, I don't know, gun damage output. Or you could have just improved add a couple of more cabinet into the game room with the coin to have just more improvement at the end of the gameplay. That's it. I would have loved that. I would have no complaint about that. I think that would be way more beneficial for the game. But at this point, after we talk about the gameplay, I want to talk about the narrative and whatever is doing the game with whatever it is Resident Evil and where it's going. So at the end of the day, I really enjoyed Resident Evil Requiem. I really enjoyed this invisible dialogue between the fan of the saga and the old fan of the saga and the new fan of the saga. I really love it. I think they reinvented the the franchise in a nice way in the last couple of years. I think it was very bold. It was very bold to reinvent it with Resident Evil 7, and I think it was very bold to reinvent it with Resident Evil 2 Remake. I think they took a very interesting choice. But at the same time, there are those, let's say, problematic things. I want to talk about, for example, about I want to talk about longevity. I want to really talk about longevity. This thing that is going to bug me for a while. It has bugged me for a while, because before the release of the game, I heard many opinions say the game is too short. The game is not very long. It gives you with a taste for more. I don't think this is the case. If you check the Resident Evil saga, usually a game goes, even Resident Evil 2 Remake, for an average player, even if you want to do all the secondary stuff, so clean every room, take all the items, solve every puzzle, I think a first run, 10 to 12 hour tops, I think you can manage as an average player. I think you're gonna do it with 10 to 12 hours. Resident Evil 2 Remake. I think that every Resident Evil never went too far, speaking of longevity, for a medium run, an average run. But moreover, I think that if we have a look at the survival horror as a genre per se, it's very difficult to find a game that goes on for more than 20 hours or so. So I think in the last probably 10 years, the only two games that I can think as a survival horror that went beyond 15 hours, so more into 20 to 30 hours, speaking of main story and side quest, for an average player, I think are just Silent Hill 2 Remake and Alan Wake 2. But both games are huge exception into the genre. Silent Hill 2 is it has a heavy plot. There is a lot of storytelling. There's so many environments, and the game, even if the gameplay at its roots is always the same, but thanks to the environment, the puzzle and stuff like that, it's keeps renovating itself. And it makes sense that even a first run, just following the main quest, it goes up to more than 15 hours, close to 20. Alan Wake 2 has two gameplay, two main character, more dynamic compared to Resident Evil 2, way more dynamic and interesting, and is on a narrative side pretty heavy, and makes sense that it's not a game that you get bored to play for that many hours. But if I check, and those are two incredibly rare exception, but if I look into the genre, the survival horror genre, ooh boy, you can't go too much on the longevity. And the reason I think are two. First reason, I believe that a gameplay has a number of hours. Speaking of gameplay loop, the number of hours are very counted. So for example, in Requiem, as I said, by the end, the final act, the final part, the final, let's say, couple of hours of the game, you got bored. But I mean, you don't get bored, but the last 2 hours you go like, okay, that's perfect, makes sense, I still want to play it. But that goes into the replayability. I can't pronounce this word. Anyway, you understood what I want to say. But the thing is that we're gonna talk about that in a second. But for concept of every survival horror, at some point you gotta call it a day, otherwise you're gonna lose your audience. And this is a mistake that Capcom has made multiple times, because Resident Evil 7, what was the thing that everyone basically found as a mistake in Resident Evil 7? The ship. the part with the ship, and the fact that the enemy were all the same. There was no variety of enemy. And basically, for the kind of concept that they have for the gameplay mechanics for Resident Evil 7 as a survival, when you reach the ship, the part with the ship, and you realize that it's not over, you go like, oh boy, really? I gotta do this? For how long? It's, even if it's not that long, because the game on average is not that very long. It's not, I think it's as well 10, 11 hours, Resident Evil 7. But anyway, the last couple of hours, you're gonna suffer. And you suffer because you can't take any more of that gameplay concept. Is stretched a little bit too far. The same thing happened with Resident Evil Village. At the end, it's stretched a little bit too far. You get bored. You add everything that gameplay that could give you. Same thing. Maybe this is an unpopular opinion. I generally think some people disagree, but I think that the island part of Resident Evil 4 remake, it's far too long, because the gameplay, it's basically the same. The enemy are basically the same. They have a shield and stuff, but they are made out of woods because they are in the castle, and here you are on an island. They are military, and the shield is not made out of wood but made out of metal. But basically the concept of the whole thing is the same. They just stretching the action gameplay that you enjoyed till that point for more hours, and the island is kind of annoying to play, to be honest. I found it kind of annoying. I was waiting for the game to end. I couldn't take it anymore. I was so bored by that, because the gameplay has given everything it could give. At the same time, survival horror, by definition, they count on replayability. That's why I say that Resident Evil 2 Remake is the perfect Resident Evil, and in my opinion, one of the best survival horror ever made, because that gameplay loop clicks so well, because it's so well balanced. Speaking of survival horror mechanics and, let's say, action mechanics, it's not a game where you can go full action, because you have to manage your bullets and stuff like that, but at the same time, it's not a game that you can go full survival horror, like, I don't have enough bullets, it's not the kind of game. It's very well managed and balanced, but mostly the map of the police station, the map of the sewer, and the map of laboratories are so well designed. Speaking of enigmas and puzzles in general and stuff, back and forth that you gotta do, that it's fun to play. It's very fun to play. In fact, some of the achievements are based on how many steps you take to finish the game. Because, for example, once you finish the game the first time, you have another hook. The hook is that you can play a Route B with Claire and see what's different. And it's a bit different. For example, with the Route B, doesn't matter if it's Claire or Leon. Mr. X, it's a little bit more annoying. It's gonna bug you a little bit more. It's a little bit faster, the Route B, and a little bit shorter, but it's also kind of a little bit more challenging on that side. And it's amazing. I love it. But at the same time, the other hook is that, okay, now I know everything, and I know, for example, I go there, I take that medallion, but at the same time I can go into that room, take the detonator, make everything blow up, and take that and do that, and you start to kind of improve your loop as you go around the police station, because you know, okay, I can open that thing because I know already the code, I can take that, have a bigger inventory, can take that, have a little bit more of ammo or whatever, take that key to open that, and I have the gem, and you start to improve the way you work around the police station, the sewer, or the laboratory. And it's amazing and it's fun. And so you have this replayability. For example, I play myself Resident Evil 2 Remake with Leon first, normal difficulty, then Route B with Claire, normal difficulty, and then I switch. I play hard with Claire, Route A, and I hard with Leon, route B. And I had the time of my life. I had so much fun. And I didn't do it because of the trophy, but because it was fun. And for example, this balance, it's very difficult to create. Take for example Dead Space. I don't know if it's an unpopular opinion or not, but Dead Space, I love Dead Space. I want to make this clear. Although even if the game is like 11-12 hours long on the first run, at the end it's kind of annoying because the gameplay loop that they fought for Dead Space doesn't evolve that much. The enemy are the same, the stuff that you do are the same. The whole gameplay loop is that, oh, you know what, Isaac, to push the Ishimura, we need to activate the engine. Before you activate the engine, there is, I don't know, a leak in the toilet on the second floor of the ship. Go there, and you go there, you fix the leak, and they tell you, you need to take a mop to clean up, and you go to another room to take the mop, you go back, you mop the floor, and in the process while you do this whole thing, you have to do the same action over and over again without much thrill in doing it. They introduced the gravity things, thank God, but except for that, there is no much variety of gameplay. That gameplay loop, it's very weak to me. I think it's very weak as variety and stuff you can do. And the way you push forward the narrative, it's always the same. Oh, there is a lamp with a bulb not working on the third floor of the Ishimura. Go there. Once you go there, can we go? No! I need crisps. Can you go to the basement of the Ishimura and to the lowest floor of the Ishimura in the engine room because there is a machine where you can take the crisps for me, and you go there. Can we go now? No! And I think you understood what I'm trying to say. And in the process, what you do, speaking of gameplay, it's always the same. So it's not that fun. And I believe this is a big downside. In Resident Evil Requiem, I think what can work is the fact that once you finish the game, you have many reasons to replay the game. Because as I said before, there are stuff that you say, oh, I should have done that thing and now I got it. I can go into that room if I do this thing. Or maybe you didn't figure it out how to unlock a room or something else. And then in the second round, you have to you start to check a little bit more what you can do, and you have new weapons and you have new perks, and so the second run is gonna be fun in a different way, and so you have reason to go back and replay it, and so it works. I think the longevity is perfect because speaking of the kind of gameplay you have in the game and speaking the kind of stuff that you can do, this is more than enough. The gameplay is solid. I think it's a solid number of hours. The longevity is perfect and it's going to be fun to replay. And that's what I wanted to say about longevity. Speaking of the game in broader term, I think the game is solid. There are so many references to Resident Evil. There are so many references to Resident Evil 2, to the saga. They have this job of, as I said before, kind of telling you, okay, the main chapter are Resident Evil 2, 4, and now Requiem. So there is this sort of a game of rewriting the history of Resident Evil in a way and center everything into the umbrella. There is a kid, there is a sort of there is Spencer, there is a sort of Birkin, but the mad scientist and stuff like that. But in all of this, I can say this, it's another weak spot is probably in the narrative. Okay, so one thing that I'm gonna say about the narrative is that I love Grace. I think Grace is a fantastic character. I love her. Ethan was anonymous, not just because he didn't have a face, because it was a character that was too much like an FPS character, so a character with no face and not big personality, but he had a role into the narrative, and so the fact of not giving him a face or the personality was a mistake. In this case, Grace has a huge personality, and I love Grace also because the range of how they work on the character. She's an analyst. She's very traumatized about what she has seen in the past. She's very insecure. When she talks to people, she goes like, she can't handle those kind of stuff compared to the previous character in the Resident Evil saga. When she talks to some people, she just stumble on her words, but also she look on the ground. She can look them directly. I love the characterization of Grace. I think she's great. The voiceover actress did an amazing job. She's amazing, and I love Leon as well. How he tells joke, delivers joke. I love Leon. I love absolutely. They did a fantastic job. And what I found crazy about this Resident Evil is that in the past, Resident Evil, I mean, it always has been a sort of a B movie, Resident Evil. There's never been a sort of, what can I say, a very kind of horror that had a sort of, it's not a Silent Hill where there is a deep attention to the narrative. Resident Evil, since the beginning, was a B movie, B horror movie. Even if there were zombies, it has nothing to do with Romero's idea of zombie that was very social, very political in a way. There is nothing about that. It's pure entertainment, and I love it. I gotta be honest, I love it. But at the same time, there was, even in the remake, Resident Evil 2 remake, when you check Marvin and Kendo and some other stuff, there is a sort of willing to give a sort of at least a coherence to the world of Resident Evil. Here, they don't even try. I mean, if from the beginning, the guy at the FBI, he calls Grace, "Hey, you chick, come on." You go like, "Oh, easy." "Grace, come on, to my office." And you go like, "Oh, easy, tranquillo." I was saying in Italian, chill out. No, Grace, come on. You gotta go there in this hotel. I don't care if they kill your mother there, because she goes like, "Oh, my mother died there." "Oh, yes. Time has passed. Come on, move forward." She was like, "I'm traumatized." Shut up. He has no sensibility whatsoever. And even in the end, after the end, he keeps treating her if she's the most useless person in the FBI. And you go like, well, actually, she did something incredible. If you could acknowledge that, it would be amazing. No, she's useless. But she keeps being treated in the worst way possible, and you don't get why. But anyway, what I love about this Requiem is that they don't even try to build a sort of a coherence. For example, Resident Evil 2, the fact that police station was in that way, was so over the top, was so gothic and opulent, we say opulent in English, or opulence, opulent, yes, opulent, yeah, makes sense. Anyway, the fact that it was so opulent makes sense, because they say, oh, it was a museum and became a police station, yada yada yada. Makes sense. Perfect. I love it. In Requiem, the fact that that hospital is like that, it's because it is like that. Shut up. It's fine. So, for example, another thing, in Resident Evil 4, you go into this village in Spain. Doesn't make any sense that in Spain there is a village that is so rural in that way. Doesn't make any sense. The perception of the Europe by the Japanese, it's completely bonkers. But it's bonkers on purpose, and it's fine. Okay. So it makes sense that those villagers, for how over the top they are, they have a chainsaw, or they go around with a hatchet or whatever. In Resident Evil Requiem, you are in an hospital. Those patients and doctor became zombies, and there is a doctor with a chainsaw, as we have seen in the trailer. And the fact that there is a doctor with a chainsaw, it doesn't make any sense. Why he has a chainsaw? He's a doctor. Most likely was around doing stuff around with the patients. Where he took the chainsaw in an hospital? It really doesn't make any sense whatsoever. It's completely bonkers. And for example, there is that guy, is the guy that is basically a butcher in the kitchen, and he's being zombified. The guy is huge. It's like a Street Sharks. I don't know if you remember the cartoon. He's huge. He's gigantic. And it doesn't make any sense that the guy is that big. Really, doesn't make any sense. It's not like the T virus mutated him. No, no, no. He's like that. He's huge, insane huge. He's as huge as if the Rock and the Mount Everest make a kid. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. Doesn't make any sense. And in a way, we're gonna talk about it later. Even the way Raccoon City is kind of retconned. And okay, okay, you just accept it. At the same time, you kind of go over the idea of the main villain. It's very far from Birkin. Birkin, for how childish and over the top, it was motivated by something. Here, the bad guy is just a very bad guy. That's doesn't make any sense that it is in the way it is. It's just like this. Shut up. So speaking of narrative in that sense, the suspension of disbelief, that we call it, or Resident Evil, it's kind of very over the top here. It's a stretch. While you play it, you go like, ah, that's fine, but it doesn't make any sense. Here in this case, they didn't even try to build a sort of Resident Evil, so that makes sense. So at the end of the day, what can I say about Requiem? I can say that I enjoy it. I can say that there are good ideas. I think that longevity wise is good. I think that in the order of idea of making a Resident Evil Requiem, the two gameplay, the narrative, everything makes sense because it's Resident Evil Requiem. I didn't like about, I'm gonna tell you here without spoiler, there are two endings. One that it's basically a fake disappointing ending, and one that is the true ending. Thank God you can just, for example, I choose the disappointing ending as my first ending because I was like, there is something fishy here, and so I went for that. It's disappointing, it's useless in a way, and I don't know why it's there. But the good thing is that once the roll credit are done, the games tell you, hey, you unlock everything that you unlock. If you want to go back to the choice, the final choice, and see the other ending, you can do it. You're not going to lose any of the progress. Okay, cool, amazing. But why? Why you have those two endings? To me, it doesn't make any sense. I don't see that. Because one, it's clearly annoying and disappointing. The other one, it's cool. It's the one where you play a little bit. There's a final boss and there is narrative, and the other one is just disappointing. And I don't get that why. I really don't get why they've done it. But moving on, I think the game is solid. I think the formula works for Resident Evil Requiem. I believe I would be very disappointed to see another Resident Evil developed in this way. To be honest, I will appreciate in the future a Resident Evil with two playable character, but I would love to have two playable character with the same gameplay. I mean, maybe with different weapons, with different impact on the enemy based on their weapons, maybe two character exploring two part of the map that are different, or they are different but connected in some way. I would like to see that in a future episode of Resident Evil, but I would love to see them choose a specific route, speaking of gameplay, because I think that if they want to make another great Resident Evil, they gotta go back to what I think the fun they love the most, so Resident Evil 2, because Resident Evil 2 has the perfect mix of action and survival horror. And I think that is the best compromise, because with that gameplay formula, you can actually make a scary game that is very immersive, but you can make as well a game that it's very fun to play as a survival horror. where you can use weapons and big weapons and guns and shotguns, and you can have fun with resources and the gameplay loop that is typical of those games. I believe that is the best solution, because Resident Evil 2, I think that Resident Evil 2, even playing first person, would be amazing. I think that would be amazing. Very immersive and very fun to play. I think that will work anyway. So I would love them to see go back to that formula, and that I think that is the perfect form for Resident Evil. Then if they want to make an action-packed Resident Evil spin-off, I think they can keep making that. Resident Evil with just Leon and Chris, and have it action-packed, it can probably work. Honestly, yes, can work, but I don't think it will work as much as an actual survival horror game. And I think in the future, if they will make, as they said, apparently they are working on the Code Veronica remake, and I think the Code Veronica would have the potential to go back as the Resident Evil 2 kind of gameplay. I think they're going down that route because I think it's the one that makes more sense. Even if we think about Resident Evil 0 with 2 playable characters, I think that will make sense to have a game with 2 protagonists, 2 gameplay, but very Resident Evil 2-ish. But with the difference that maybe the girl has least lethal weapon, so with a lowest damage output, and the other one has weapon with the biggest damage output. Maybe it has more interesting way to survive. I don't know, peculiarity that will change the gameplay enough to make a difference, but to give to the audience the kind of, to the players, the same kind of experience. I think that would be beneficial. I can speculate that if it is true that they're making a Resident Evil 1 remake, according to my theory of the conversation with the player based on Resident Evil 2, 4 and Requiem to be sort of the main canon of the saga, if they are actually making a remake of Resident Evil 1, I think they will release it as Resident Evil 1, we like the number 1, and it will be a reboot of the saga. And I think that they can start from there to create a new Resident Evil saga without Leon Kennedy, without Grace or whatever. A new Resident Evil saga, new Point Zero with new character. I think that would be the way to go forward, probably. Or maybe they will just make a remake of Resident Evil 1 and that's it. But I think that could be a good occasion to do that and to start fresh and to create. If they make a Resident Evil 1 remake, they can expand the gameplay. They of course will go back to Resident Evil 2 kind of gameplay, but I think that would be a good occasion to make Route A and Route B of Chris and Jill very interesting, but also to give more a little bit of identity to Jill and Chris. Jill had a good identity in Resident Evil 3 remake. I love that, and I love the design of the character, but I would love to see that in the first Resident Evil, because moving on in the saga, those characters kind of disappeared in a way, honestly. And so I loved Requiem. Those are my general consideration. I love absolutely Leon. I loved Grace. I think the villain are kind of dull. They are not much very interesting. And at this point, the only thing that I can left to say, it's about spoilers. So if you have played the game, stay with me. If you haven't, leave, because I'm gonna spoil everything about Resident Evil 2. So 3, 2, 1. Okay, a little bit of spoiler. I'm not gonna take too much. I'm gonna talk about a couple of stuff. I believe the writing, as I said before, just gave up the idea of making a game that has a game that makes sense in a way, in his own way, in his own word. I'm not saying sense in a broader way, because of course every time you approach fantastic tales, not fantasy, fantastic, so words that are horrific or whatever completely invented. The rule of that reality are decided by that reality. Everyone, whoever applied the rule of our reality to a fiction word is crazy. It doesn't work like that. But anyway, I think that, as I said before, even if it made sense, like Resident Evil 2 remake, they try to write those characters, they try to make something out of it. In this game, they don't. They just gave up. For example, I didn't like the FBI director. It was very out of touch, that character. Oh, go there, shut up and go. But my mom was gutted there in front of my eyes. She was low, throat cuts, blood, burn, everything burning down. It was terrible. Shut up, go. You're a grown up. Doesn't make any sense. I didn't like Sherry Birkin. I like the fact that she's there, but I think that they could have put a dialogue, something to create a meaningful connection. Instead, it's there just for some fan service purpose. That's it. I mean, just a small dialogue. As soon as he's back to the RPD, just give me something. Give me something. Even when he goes down in the laboratory and there is that part of the gameplay that it's very Resident Evil 2. But instead, when there is Sherry, that is she's passed out and she's in the trash. You leave there and you go to do whatever. Leon is in the same condition, and there could have been a good occasion to say, hey, this reminds me of when yada yada yada, you were there infected. That could have been very, very interesting, to have a dialogue connecting to the past and them confronting on whatever happened in Raccoon City back then. But instead, that's nothing. There's nothing there. Even the dialogue between something about Ada Wong, when he goes in some part of the game, something about Ada, there is nothing. When, for example, I found interesting that they gave Hank a role in this game. When there is the boss fight with Hank, not a great boss fight, boring as well, this one, but the fact that there are Leon and Hank fighting, it's great. It's a great homage. I loved it. I absolutely love it. But I didn't love the fact that, for example, so this is the thing. You go back to no, you are with Grace. You have with Grace, and you have the little girl. Okay, the little girl story, the little girl arc. Let's talk about that. So she finds the little girl blind in the cell. As soon as I saw the little girl, I went like, she must be a clone. But right away, I didn't have a doubt, because she's the spit image of Grace. I was like, it's not possible that Capcom invested no time in making a little girl. She must be a clone. She's in a cage. She must be a monster. One of the monster, probably just the girl mutated. Must be something like that. And in fact, I mean, it's so predictable, because they didn't put, they could have give long hair to the little girl. You would have thought anyway, man, they look like alike. But if you put a way long hair, long to the knees, super long, maybe that would make more sense. But with that short hair in that way, they are the same. The same. She's in the cell, and she's gonna be important and whatever. Okay, that's fine. And moving forward, there is that scene where she dies. Of course, she dies. And she turns into the monster, and Leon kills the monster. But at the end of the day, at the end of the game, she survives. For reasons that are very just because there is this happy ending with her that survives. They give you the potion. She go back to be a normal girl. You see this shot of her inside of the shell, sort of the shell of what was the monster before. How they found that, it's beyond me since the whole thing exploded. But anyway, she's saved. She go back to be a little girl. She's not even blind anymore at the end. And there is this happy ending that doesn't make any sense. There is Leon saying, "Oh, but I didn't shot on vital part. I made sure." And I was like, "No, you didn't." Because there is the scene with Grace screaming on top of their lungs and Leon shooting down the monster. So it goes like, Grace, I gotta do it. There is this thing. And Grace, there is even a plot point there because Grace goes away. She leaves the room. Leon doesn't say anything. He could have been saying, Grace, I don't know. I made sure I didn't shot vital part. You go like, why? Based on what? It's a monster. You had no clue about it. But anyway. And at the end, she walks away and she found Zeno, the other villain. Even the... Oh my god, how that part of the story, that how poorly is told that part of the story. The mise-en-scene is horrible. But anyway, we go beyond. But the thing is that the whole arc of the little girl doesn't make any sense. It's so happy at the end. There is an happy ending with Grace that it's so weird. In Resident Evil 2, there is something very similar, to be honest. Sherry, she loses her father, that it turns into a monster and try to chase her. She loses her mother, and at the end, there is her father as this gigantic monster tried to kill them, and they kill him. He explodes. And she was infected. She was about to die. And then they go away while there is a nuke going on in Raccoon City. A little bit later, to be honest. But anyway, they leave Raccoon City on the sunset. Sun is rising and it's amazing. She goes like, maybe we can be a family. You just lost your parents. She just forgot. She should be destroyed. Instead, she go like, oh, we can be a family. Everyone together. You go like, okay, come on. What are we doing here? But anyway, Resident Evil has those kind of blackout moment where you see this happy ending that doesn't make any sense. But anyway, even here, also because Leon has an amazing moment, because when you go back to Kendo shop, you have the flashback of when you went to the Kendo shop in Raccoon City and Kendo had the daughter that was mutated because probably she was infected by one of the zombies. Maybe she was bitten or whatever, and she's turning, and Kendo is upset and he says to Leon, you should have protect us, you should have prevent this to happen, why you haven't done something? And Leon has a sense of responsibility. Okay, and back then you hear just the gunshot and Leon has no... He respects that moment and he doesn't go into the room to check. But now, years later, he goes. He opens the door and he finds the remains of the little girl that Kendo shot, probably to avoid to have her turn into a zombie. And it's very great. It's so good because it gives a depth to Leon. The fact that Grace has no such moment because everything for her is an happy ending, it's kind of it's a disappointment. It's very disappointing. I know Resident Evil is a B movie and everything, but that would have made sense. I mean, but anyway, speaking of villains at the end, Gideon is basically a bad guy because he's bad. That's it. At the end, he finds out that Spencer basically he engineered this whole thing as a redemption. Elpsis is a redemption. It goes like, ha! He was a genius. It was great, but I'm gonna destroy the world anyway. And you go like, what? He's like Michael Scott. It doesn't make any sense. And then you have Zeno. Zeno is a sort of a proto Wesker. And Gideon says that you're just a copy, he says to Zeno. But Zeno is that kind of villain that is all appearances and no substance. Basically, he has zero. It's the classic Japanese villain that is all style and no, there is nothing behind him. I mean, he has no motivation. He has no. His whole personality is based on the fact that he's dressed up in white with the jacket on his shoulder, and that's it. That's it. And it's not like I want a very deep character, but just at least something. Give me something. It gives you nothing. And I found it hilarious. It's just empty. But anyway, the other thing that it made me laugh big time. So at the end of the game, you play the whole game with them saying, she's the key. Grace is the key. She's the key for Elpis. She's the key. She's the key. She's the key. She's the kid. She was kidnapped 25 times during the game, and nobody ever checked her pocket. Never. Never. Even Gideon. She kidnapped her at the beginning of the game, put her on his shoulder. He has a hand on her ass, where I believe she has the disc that at the end of the game she takes out. Because at the end of the game, oh, she's the key, she's the key, she's the key. She takes out a disc like this. Oh, I have disc. My mom disc. Oh, let's put it into this computer that very, I don't know, very conveniently can read old floppy disk. Let's put it in. And then she sees this video of her mother investigation into Spencer, and you found out that she actually is not like her mother-daughter, even if they are the same. But I don't know. That part of the, I mean, you could have delivered this whole thing in a different way. You could have give since the beginning the idea that Grace is not actually the daughter of the Ashcroft. I don't remember what's her name. You could have give something, even minimal, to say that they are not actually related. She was hiding something. This whole thing about the disc doesn't work. It's very cheap. It's very nonsense. It's okay for Resident Evil. It's okay. As I said before, it's a B movie. It's a kind of soap opera kind of movie. Even in Resident Evil 2, there is Ada falling for, I don't know. She falls down so fast that when the camera from the bottom, there's this shot from the bottom, and Ada motionless fall down. She goes like, you gotta, wherever she's landing, she's gonna die. Doesn't matter if it's water, I don't know, unicorns made out of, I don't know, candy, I don't know, wherever she's landing, she's gonna die. It's such a steep fall, she's gonna die. But anyway, she survived. You don't know how, what, that doesn't make any sense. She survived. That's it. And Resident Evil is like that, we know, but sometimes you go like, you could have put a little bit of effort to sell me this. Just a little, a tiny bit, and would have worked. Instead, nothing. And at the end of the day, when everything goes down and it's over, you're happy with it. I'm gonna be honest, I was happy with it. I had fun. It was great. I'm gonna replay it. I'm gonna have fun replaying it. But there are those stuff that they don't make any sense. Absolutely, they don't make much sense. But it's part of the charm of Resident Evil, to be honest. And it's fine like that. It's very fine like that. And I just hope that for the future they're gonna put a little bit more of consideration, and they're not going down to the wacky over the top route of Resident Evil 5 and 6. I think that with Village as well, they they tried again to go down that route, and I think the response was not that positive, and probably they learned that they should not do that. And I hope that they learned that they should not do that. But I don't know. The future is unpredictable, so everything can happen. But anyway, those are my consideration about Resident Evil Requiem. As I said before, I talk a lot, and in those are not per se review, just like a deep dive talking about the game to keep you company and to just have a chat about the game. So let me know your thoughts. Let me know what you think about Requiem. You like it, you didn't like it, it was something that you enjoy, whatever. Let me know your thoughts, and see you next time. I don't know when, I don't know where. Next time I want to talk about Remedy. I'm telling you right now, I want to talk about the Remedy, the whole thing. So vote the podcast, share it, leave a comment. See you next time. Bye bye.